Hello, my name is Dr. Ridwan Fontaine and I teach Islamic management at the International Islamic University Malaysia. Today we will focus on this idea of reflecting on the reflections of my students on Surah Al Fatihah. So I want to give a little bit of a background. So since 2010, I've been asking my students to watch Islamic content once a week throughout the semester. Each time they watch a video, I ask them to write down in a diary their thoughts and the reflections so that they don't forget. And at the end of the semester, I would collect all of their reflections and they would write a report. The result was very, very good. A lot of my students said that it really helped them improve a lot in their understanding, and so I was very happy. A few years later, in around 2015, I realized that they were learning a lot about Islam, but they were still not learning much about Quran. So I then started to ask them to reflect on Surah Al Fatihah specifically. The result was okay, but I realized they found it very difficult to start because they didn't know what questions to ask. And in fact, I realized that they had been trained to read Quran without understanding it or without reflecting on it. So we would have like group discussions, and I would kind of brainstorm with them what are the kind of questions they could ask and so on and so forth. So I realized I was actually doing the same thing all the time. And in order to save time, I decided to start recording YouTube videos, and I started the YouTube channel. Since then, what I realized is that it's a lot easier for my students to start the process of reflecting because they can see what I've done and kind of do their own thing. So a few things are quite important. First of all, is it easy to reflect on the Quran? Yes, it is. Again, reflecting the Quran is not doing tafsir of Quran. Tafsir is the ulama who do this, the scholars who do the tafsir. Reflecting is literally understanding what the Quran is saying and then relating it to your own life. And I had this very memorable event where one of my students didn't do his assignment. So I called him to my office and I basically gave him an oral exam. And I asked him, reflect on Surah Al Fatihah. And he thought about it for about 3 seconds. And then he started, sharing his thoughts and his reflections. And what struck me is that literally he just had to think about it for only 3 seconds. If you think what I'm the most grateful for, or what's my biggest problem, straight away you can link that to Surah Al Fatihah. The second question is it helpful? And generally, over the last few years, it's been very clear that reflecting on Surah Al Fatihah in particular helps my students to become more grateful, and also to put whatever problems that they've had in their lives in its proper perspective, so that they don't over dramatize their problems and they realize that actually they've learned a lot of things from their problems. So a lot of the problems in the past were actually blessings in disguise. Now, I don't want these videos to be about me simply talking in front of the camera. I want to kind of share with you a few things that my students have written. So just happens that the semester is over and I taught a group of students strategic management, and they did a reflection on Surah Al Fatihah. So I have 3 entries that I would like to share. I will not mention the name because it's anonymous, but one of my students wrote, "It has been a week since the day I started to understand Surah Al Fatihah. Me and my friends have been exchanging our understanding on the surah and sharing our thoughts. I've never felt so peaceful and calm since the moment I started to understand each ayat of Surah Al Fatihah." Now, I like this entry in particular because this is what I'm trying to do, is to create a culture where students in my class have understood Al Fatihah and then start talking about it and then sharing their opinions about it. Okay, let me go to another person who, in the conclusion, they wrote, "Overall, in my opinion, reflecting on Al-Quran really changes me to be a better person. If we always reflect ourselves with the teachings of the Quran, we will always remember and realize our wrongdoings and quickly repent ourselves. It will make us more cautious to do everything in this life, even to speak with other people. It positively affects my thinking style and my behavior. Most of the time, I will always remember to talk and treat other people nicely, because they are also people, and being good to people is one of the teachings of Al-Quran and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. A third conclusion, which I actually like a lot. So the person wrote, I remember back in school, a lot of my peers, including me, memorized the meaning of surahs just for the sake of getting good results in exams. After the exams, we would end up forgetting whatever we had memorized. However, after watching the videos, I began to see everything in a new light. I never thought of Surah Al Fatihah as a means of having a conversation with Allah. And the fact that we can get to speak to Him every time we pray is amazing. This assignment made me realize the importance of learning and understanding Islam on my own. I cannot just rely on whatever I learned in school, because the school cannot teach us everything that we need to know. Okay, that's kind of the end of the reflections. The point that I'm trying to make is that there is no doubt that reflecting on Surah Al-Fatihah is easy. Everybody can do it, and certainly it seems to be very, very beneficial for all the students who do it, right? So inshallah, we will continue with this, and the next session will be, we'll have a series of videos about discussing whether or not it's easy to enter paradise, and then after that, we'll start doing Surah Al-Baqarah. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.